Chapter 174. Little Mute. Seven Blood Eyes Main City. In the coastal area, the winter wind carried a gentleness that blew to every corner of the streets. Different from the cold in the Red Plains, it was delicate and down, which made it difficult to detect it at first. It was only when it seeped into one's bones and gradually turned cold from the inside out that one would feel it. By then, it would be too late to resist. Just like the Piedmont disciple of the Seven Blood Eyes, the cruelty hidden under their smiling faces was like needles hidden in cotton. This was more prominent in the Seventh Peak. The disciples of the Seventh Peak seemed to have some talent in this aspect. They were good at concealing their true thoughts. They placed their interests above everything else and could abandon their superficial dignity. Xu Qing knew this very deeply. He had already integrated into the main city environment of the Seven Blood Eyes, and as his cultivation level increased, he relied on ruthless methods to gain a foothold in the Seven Blood Eyes. The danger he encountered was reduced and he gained some reputation. However, his caution and vigilance never decreased at all. This was because Xu Qing was very clear that among the Ascension disciples of the Seventh Peak, there were often traces of low-level cultivators killing each other. As for high-level cultivators, especially those who had reached the 9th or 10th level of Ascension, most of them were scheming and shrewd. They were good at pretending and even better at enduring. They were like venomous snakes hiding in the dark. Once one was targeted by them, they might die without knowing who killed them. In reality, it wasn't just these people, those cultivators who had climbed up through the struggles in the main city and broken through to the foundation building realm would be even better at this. For example, the Third Highness. Xu Qing was walking in the main city of the Seven Blood Eyes. His expression looked calm, but he was inwardly vigilant. He was still in disguise. He had been walking in the main city for more than half a day. The places he went to were mostly places with a lot of people. He kept paying attention to his surroundings and listened to everything. He was searching for some clues that might verify if anything happened between the Third Highness and the merfolk race. He was extremely patient and walked from day to night. When night fell, Xu Qing still didn't return to his original identity. In fact, he didn't use his token when he returned but an anonymous jade slip. The Seven Blood Eyes anonymous jade slip had already formed an industry chain. There was a lot of demand for it, and it became the first choice for wanted criminals and people who didn't want to reveal their identities. It was extremely expensive, but the corresponding advantages were great. Among them, the most attractive benefit was concealment. The Seven Blood Eyes turned a blind eye to this. Although they would occasionally screen those with anonymous jade slips, they would ignore it most of the time. Of course, the prerequisite was that one didn't touch the rules and bottom line of the Seven Blood Eyes. Xu Qing had killed too many wanted criminals and had some such jade slips on him. He found an inn that was open and stayed there. Just like that, time flowed by, and very soon, 3 days passed. During these 3 days, Xu Qing investigated many times and understood everything through various methods. He even spent some spirit coins to buy some information about the Seven Blood Eyes, but he didn't find any clues. It was as though there was no follow-up to the merfolk race's matter, and the Third Highness also really didn't pursue the matter. During this time, the most discussed topic among the Seven Blood Eyes disciples was the competition of the Seventh Peak. Xu Qing had heard of this many times in the past 3 days. Most of the information he bought was about the competition. It seemed like the attention of all the disciples in the Seven Blood Eyes was on this. After Xu Qing thought about this, a deep look appeared in his eyes. The Seventh Peak's competition was held once every 30 years. It was very special. Most of the time, the choice of the battlefield was in a certain area in the outside world, and the process was extremely bloody and cruel. For example, 30 years ago, they had chosen the Merfolk Island as the battlefield. After a suppressive competition there, the merfolk race became the allies of the human race. The target for this time was also set. It was a small non-human race on the Western Reef Archipelago. This non-human race was called the Northern Spirit Race. Most of their people were cruel and bloodthirsty, and their entire race was made up of pirates. They relied on many larger non-human races to provide them with resources in exchange for protection. At the same time, they were also active on the Forbidden Sea. They were a great threat to the merchant ships, especially the Seven Blood Eyes merchant ships. Recently, some of them had been hijacked by them. This matter infuriated the Seven Blood Eyes. Hence, Even though the other party returned the stolen goods very quickly, it just so happened that it was the 7th Peak's grand competition. Hence, the location of this competition was arranged to be the Northern Spirit Island. This attracted a lot of attention in the 7 Blood Eyes, and the 7th Peak's disciples were already grinding their fists. Everyone who was qualified to participate was preparing. In an instant, the prices of cultivation resources at the port head increased by about 20%. Moreover, the sect also issued the qualifications and rules for participation. There were a total of 13 departments on the 7th Peak. Each department would choose about 400 people, so there would be more than 5,000 cultivators as the candidates for this competition. To these 13 departments, it was difficult to choose 400 people. It wasn't an issue about the number. In reality, there were many disciples in each department. There were thousands in the big departments, and the smaller ones also had about 1,000. The difficulty was because too many people wanted to participate. The rewards for the competition were extremely generous. One would obtain 10,000 contribution points for every cultivator they killed. This was only the base reward. The higher the cultivation of the enemy they killed, the more rewards they would receive. The identity tokens would automatically record the points, which would then be distributed after the competition ended. Such a sum of wealth was enough to make the eyes of many disciples who were struggling with cultivation resources red with envy. What made people gasp and even go crazy was the reward for the first place in this competition. Core Divinity. Countless Piedmont disciples of the 7th Peak. Core disciples who could wear light purple Taoist robes were all as high and mighty as divine children. Their statuses were extremely noble. Just like what the captain had said back then, the sect wouldn't care if 100 Piedmont disciples die. But if even one core disciple die, it would be a huge matter. Hence, the madness of the disciples of the various departments could be understood. However, Xu Qing didn't have much desire for the status of a core disciple. If it was when he had just arrived at the 7 Blood Eyes, the status of a core disciple would still be tempting to him. However, now that his cultivation had reached the perfected condensation realm, to Xu Qing, breaking through to the foundation building realm as soon as possible was his priority. In addition, Xu Qing felt that this competition wasn't that simple. The venue of the competition that was announced, Northern Spirit Island, seemed to be to delude the outside world. When he thought of his previous analysis, Xu Qing felt that the true battlefield might be on the territory of the merfolk race. With this thought in mind, Xu Qing cautiously observed for a few more days while the other disciples were doing their best to fight for the qualifications. After confirming that there was indeed no follow-up regarding the merfolk race in the sect, and it was the same for the Third Highness, Xu Qing simply changed back to his identity. He remained vigilant for a few more days before his heart calmed down. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Xu Qing didn't want to leave the 7 Blood Eyes at this moment. This was because he wasn't far from the foundation building. He really wanted to obtain the benefit of 5,000 spirit stones every month that was given to foundation building disciples. Now that everything was normal, Xu Qing returned to his usual life with vigilance. A few days later, he received a notice from his captain. The second reward for Night Dove's operation had been given. He was appointed as the deputy captain of the Black Team 6 of the Homicide Department. His salary also increased from 3,000 contribution points a month to 6,000. Xu Qing, you have to thank me for this. If I hadn't fought for you with all my might, how could you have a day where you were promoted? In the Homicide Department, the captain sat at the side and smiled at Xu Qing as he ate an apple. His gaze sized him up. Clearly, he had sensed the fluctuations of Xu Qing's cultivation base. However, his smile was still there and he was eating the apple deliciously. Thank you, Captain. When Xu Qing heard this, he revealed a smile. Ever since he came to the 7 Blood Eyes, he had learned some control over his expression. However, it was still a little unnatural. So, don't forget the 1,000 spirit stones you owe me, the captain said happily. Xu Qing's smile instantly froze. It's 100, and I've returned it to you. Ah, have you returned it? My memory is too bad. I remember now. You returned 100 to me. All right. You still owe me 900 spirit stones then. The captain slapped his forehead and sighed. Seeing that Xu Qing's expression seemed to be unnatural and his right hand was even instinctively placed beside the leather bag at his side, he blinked. Are you going to participate in the competition? Xu Qing didn't speak. Xu Qing, let me tell you this. With my understanding of the sect's habits, there's a high chance that the competition this time won't be targeting the Northern Spirit race. The captain's expression was a little excited. He squatted on the chair and took out 2 tangerines. After tossing one to Xu Qing, he peeled it as he spoke. Xu Qing caught the tangerine and looked at the captain. I reckon it should be a much larger non-human island. Moreover, this non-human race must be very rich, so the sect released smoke to confuse the outside world. Recently, it'd been observing a few famous sinister people in the other departments and found that they have all secretly registered. The more the captain spoke, the more excited he became. His eyes even seemed to shine. In reality, these vicious people have long saved up enough spirit stones to buy the foundation building pill and can break through at any time. However, they suppressed their cultivation and didn't break through. Clearly, they were all waiting for this opportunity. They all have dot noses and their sense of smell is extremely sharp. Since they are willing to give up the benefits of breaking through to the foundation building realm for the past few months, their target is naturally even higher. Therefore, this competition should be an excellent opportunity to snatch cultivation resources. You have to know that in that competition 30 years ago, many people made a fortune because of this. I heard that that woman, the Second Highness, rose up through this. It said that even some elders were envious of the wealth she plundered. Just counting the foundation building pills, she snatched 8 of them. In addition, many people in the sect who are close to breaking through, but don't have enough spirit stones are all staring at this competition to accumulate spirit stones. Aren't you going to participate in such an opportunity to make a fortune? The captain looked at Xu Qing with a smile. Xu Qing still didn't speak. His judgment of the location of the competition was the same as the captain's. Moreover, he had even guessed where the final battlefield was. So this time, you must go and make a fortune. You just need to get the resources needed for foundation building. There's also a newbie in the team. I will call him over for you. As the captain spoke, he took out his token and transmitted his voice. Not long later, light footsteps rang out from outside the room the captain and Xu Qing were in. Very soon, the door opened, revealing the figure of a youth. This youth's hair was a little disheveled and his small face was dirty. Although he was wearing a gray Taoist robe, it was bulging. Under the Taoist robe was a black dogskin coat. The most eye-catching thing was the youth's eyes. His eyes were filled with sharpness and cruelty, as if the person standing there wasn't a person, but a ferocious little wolfhound. The baleful aura on his body was extremely heavy, as though it could erupt and devour the enemy at any moment. When he saw the captain and Xu Qing in the room, he grinned, but he had no tongue. He was a mute. However, as Xu Qing's gaze landed on him, the mute youth's smile suddenly paused. His eyes abruptly widened as he looked at the shadow under Xu Qing's seat. His expression changed drastically, like he had seen an extremely terrifying existence. His body started trembling, and his breathing became rough. It was like a mortal meeting the god. The room instantly fell into dead silence.